theater and film played a pivotal role in your recovery?
I mean, mine, like I mentioned it in my bio because this is a big part of my recovery, was I wanted to be Annie in the musical Annie. I loved that story and I loved theater, and I was in the rehearsal process when I was going through treatment. So I still like felt super sick. I was like starting to grow back hair, but not done with that at all. But it was something that I looked forward to every day that I could go. It was a story of a girl that like everything in her life was awful, and she had this like optimism and hope. And so like being getting to embody that kind of a story when you're going through something that feels very hopeless was everything at the time. And so I think since then too, there's a lot of emotional trauma to process that it helps to either be able to tell your personal story or to tell stories of other people to keep processing sort of what you've been through.
So how about you, for you? How do you feel that film or theater, more film probably?
Well, actually, in the beginning, it was definitely more film because, so I was in the hospital for a pretty good chunk. I did a bone marrow transplant, so there's this part where it's called isolation. You're in there for like 30 to 60 days without leaving the room and everything. So I just watched a ton of movies, and once you exhaust the first commercial stuff, you start finding like the weird classics and the French movies and the German movies,
Oh, that's amazing.
and so I kind of feel like that was my like film school, I guess.
Yeah.
When I was like 15,
Film
16.
study.
And so for me it was mainly escapism in the beginning, and that was the same because I went home, did a year of recovery and everything, and as soon as I felt well enough and my brain was kind of back, I started making these short films with the family camera, essentially, right? And again, I was approaching it as escapism. They were mostly funny or science fiction-y or Stephen King-y or something like that, right? But looking back, what I realized the thing I was really after was control, because I had lost so much control, like on my own life in that time. So, but when you put a scene together, when you're working on a scene, it's something that you can shape completely. It's and it has like a beginning, middle, and end. And
controlling the story.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
the narrative.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And whether it be what you went through or just anything, it's so helpful to be into that.
Definitely. Excellent. Is there a director or genre that really spoke to you at that time that like stood out to you, or that kind of helped you through? Or?
At that time?
Yeah.
Like you mean in movies or?
Yeah.
I became so into Godard, which was weird for a 16-year-old.
Not at all.
But it was so weird.
Yeah.
The movies are so strange. If you really look at them, they're just weird.
Yeah.
And I still kind of, I look back at that like, wow, that blew my mind, right? Because like it wasn't like Wayne's World, which the rest of my friends were really into. Still good. But
I think that says something about the overall experience with cancer, though. I mean, it's such a thing where it's almost incomprehensible to regular experience or how life is supposed to be, right? And so when something like that happens or affects you, I don't know. I was a horror freak. I loved going to the scary stuff and the horror things and the Stephen King. I love that weird shiz. Like, I still do. I still like the weird stuff. And I think a part of that is that, my world was not something I could comprehend. So finding other stories that were also bizarre or strange or different than the norm, than the usual, was almost comforting. And the fact that, well, maybe I'm not so weird, I'm not so different. There are other stories that are bizarre, and ones that are bizarre to me, that's really cool, because that means, like, it could get even worse. Like, it's really weird out there. This life is crazy. There's some weird stuff.
Yeah, so, you don't feel so out of place.
Yeah.
So, Rebecca, what brought you into theater at that time as you were going into it?
Yeah, so I started off really wanting to be a singer ever since I was young. I was terrible, though, so it took a lot of lessons. So I wanted to be a singer, and that was just the way that I expressed and I got the emotions out. But it wasn't until I went through a really dark period that was pretty long period, and it wasn't until high school when I started getting into theater really, and I started coming out of my shell. I realized I could actually look people in the eye as I was walking down the street, and just doing simple things like standing up and practicing projection to the back of the house, which is something that all actors have to learn. Just practicing that made me go, wait a second, I can stand tall, I can have presence, and I don't need to apologize for that. Was something that was a huge changing point for my confidence and for my ability to get out there and socialize with others.
Sarah Beth, do you feel like is there anything that really brought you more to your recovery in theater, that other therapies sometimes lack?
Yeah, I mean, I do think it's that idea of being able to control a narrative and being able to understand a story, and from the acting standpoint of empathy and becoming someone else that has it worse than you, or that has it different than you do. It takes you out of that personal inward struggle, to keep understanding that the world is larger. And I wasn't into horror at the time, so it wasn't that the rest of the world is even scarier than what I'm going through, but that same idea of there's other things happening, and there's other things to hope for and to look towards, and other stories that are going on. So I didn't have to focus so much at the time on what was happening to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Do you feel like even now that you just went through creating a film about it, do you feel like it kind of the choices you make in your artistic decisions are influenced by, obviously a little bit, but by your experience from that? Or?
Yeah, actually, and funny you say that. I was going through my old tapes and finding some of those old films that I did when I was a teenager, and what I realize now, having watched them, I thought that they were fun, and they were kind of horror things where a car eats a person, stuff like that, right? But I realized that they really are elements of each concept was an element of something I had gone through in cancer, right? The car eating the person one was I always thought that because I would work on my car and stuff. I always thought that the garage and all the chemicals and stuff in there, that's kind of what gave me cancer and everything, right? And so, and I didn't, I wasn't consciously putting that into that film. But looking back, I'm that's exactly what that's about. Oh my God.
Yeah.
But so moving forward, and everything I've ever written, there's always been an element of, of that isolation or that life threat and all that other stuff. And so, and obviously in Cancer Rebellion, it's head on, but everything else, especially that triptych film that, if you don't think of, it doesn't say cancer on anywhere. It's not about cancer or anything, but if you examine it that way, wow, I'm talking about it in some way too.
So Rebecca, for you, do you feel like your experience with cancer and theater in your youth obviously made you make decisions in your life to go into it as a career?
Yeah, I feel like theater specifically gave me a voice, gave me a way to be heard, a way to express. And so I think that was very influential, and because it helped change me so much, I felt that it was just a necessary path, I guess. It's always called me, and as it's changed me, I've just continued down that path. And so, yeah, I feel like it was a huge part of the reason that I'd wake up every day, the reason I want to keep going. And it was, and that's clearly what I've chosen to do with my life then, is to be able to live that every day. I am happiest when I'm in the rehearsal room. I'm happiest when I'm able to come to a show. I'm happiest when I'm able to work with amazing kids that are also going through similar things.
Do you feel like your experience when you work with in these workshops really gives you a different kind of an eye what to look for and how to help.
Yes, it's kind of crazy. So our workshops are for not only children that have cancer themselves, but ones that are affected. So siblings, children of parents that have cancer, things like that. And so for me, I remember watching my brother go through it and kind of how it was for him. But just as much on the reverse side for siblings, it affects family just as much as the person going through it. We're also feel isolated. We also feel, like they're powerless. We want to help, we can't. And so as I work with these kids, I see a lot of the similarities of, that girl was me. I get that girl. I get what she's going through right now because I was there. And so it's an awesome opportunity to kind of spread it forward, I guess, like move it, like this chance to say you also have hope. There's also stuff to work for you. Your dreams matter and should be heard and should have a voice, and helping them have just even a moment of feeling that, or like with you when you experience Annie, just that opportunity to like, I want to do this, I want to be this, and giving them a chance to do and be helps them go beyond their circumstances and have hope.
Sarah Beth, do you feel like your, as you've gone into your career, that your cancer experience has influenced your decisions or how you kind of see things or do things, or what projects you work on?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think it continues to influence me, and it's changed a lot as I've grown into an adult. Because I went through treatment in elementary school, wow. And I was like, sort of felt isolated from friends just because I was like the different one. I had all this stuff going on. Not that I was bullied or anything, but just people didn't really know what to do with me. And so I went to middle school and I was like, I don't want to be seen as the kid that had cancer. I don't want it to affect my life. That's over. It's done. I'm not the kid who had cancer anymore. And I went through a period of time with that. And then it was when I was looking at colleges and thinking about what I wanted to do with my life that I just kept thinking about the experiences that I had, and that did shape who I was and how I look at the world. And I've always been a little bit older than the people around me because I had to grow up really quickly. And there is also that sense of just like, I went through cancer. I would really like to do this acting thing, and let's see what filmmaking's about. Like, it can't be so hard. It can't be worse. It can't be worse. It can't be worse than cancer. Right? Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes.
It's a different kind of bad sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that affected where I chose to go to school, and then ultimately it continues to affect what I do. I work in commercials a lot of the time, which is lovely and pays the bills, but I also try and do things like this with Dean Productions. There's another nonprofit that I work with a lot that gave me a scholarship when I was in college, and so I volunteer with them and help them give scholarships to other kids. So it's something that still affects me, and getting to talk to other cancer survivors and people that have had siblings or people with cancer in their families, like it helps me to continue to process what I went through, and then I hope that it helps other people to get to share what happened with me.
Definitely. Excellent. Last question, and then we'll end it. Is really just kind of how you feel like. Do you feel like more therapies would, like in this sort of thing, to help other children in this situation applies to all, or what do you guys feel like kind of that you would like to see?
So I want to start with this one. So I feel like the world in general, right? We're just gonna generalize a little bit, is doing a pretty good job of trying to use art therapies a lot more expressional things that deal with like the emotions, allow youth going through these experiences to have alternative forms of expression, which I think is really important, and that is on the grow, and hopefully will continue to grow. I think something that is lacking still is specific theater and film therapies as much, using that as actively.
or the belief in it
or the belief
of
in
the
it.
in the medical system, essentially.
Yeah, exactly. I agree that, not downing on art therapy at all, because it's very, very great and very powerful. But sitting in a counselor's office drawing a picture does perform a function, but getting out of my life, out of myself, and becoming someone else, and finding freedom, and therein finding that there is a life outside of these circumstances that I can choose to live, that I can choose to be, was more freeing for me than all the hours of therapy, all the hours of everything else that I've ever went through. And ultimately was what healed me, per se, and gave me a chance to live. So I feel like if we could find a stronger way to put these type of things into actual more therapy programs, or build organizations that do more of this stuff, give more kids the opportunity to experience these things, I think that will give their mental and emotional health such a much larger boost that could ultimately help them recover.
I think that storytelling aspect is what is so important, and you just don't get that in the same way from art therapy, in my opinion. And music therapy is wonderful, and I love those and believe in those, and they helped me, especially when I was in the office and I had to sit there all day. And it's so much nicer to get to express myself through visual art.
Especially as a young child.
Yeah, especially
Yeah.
as a kid,
Yeah.
like those are wonderful things. But I do think that the storytelling aspect is really healing, because
And story
whether-
shaping.
and story
really.
shaping. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
in control of
Control.
the story, and whether you want to tell your own story that might be painful and cathartic and good, or you just want to tell a story about a car that eats people. Like, you're
I
in
think
control
we need to see this movie.
of that story. There's a
No,
But
it's
it-
funny.
yeah, and I don't think you see those as often,
Absolutely.
especially in offices, in the medical community, like you were saying.
Well, I really believe in narrative therapy in general. I feel like that needs to be more widespread. But what I'm trying to do, especially with, say, the film, like with Cancer Rebellion and some of the other projects I've recently been doing, I actually did a virtual reality piece about a ballerina who gets diagnosed with cancer. Actually, that will be done in December. But so there's more tiers to what I'm trying to pull off. But
They'll bring tissues to his
the-
movie, apparently.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there's joy in that too. But what I'm really trying to do is change society's perception of what cancer is. Like, there's a lot of fear, and there's a lot of emotions wrapped up in the word cancer that don't help people survive, don't help people, go through their days when they're in it. And so if I can just kind of spread a little more understanding of what it looks like, spread a little more, positivity and empowerment in that experience, then and doing that to like a broad audience will prepare more people for the inevitability of going through cancer. Because, hey, if you ask a group of people that to stand up, who here
Who's
has
been
not been
affected.
touched by cancer, it's gonna happen, right?
Yeah.
But the more you know ahead of time, the more you're able to support your friends who are going through it, the more you're able to face it and thrive afterwards. So, and I know it's a really broad goal, but I think we can pull that off.
I
Yeah.
definitely think so.
Absolutely.
I will say really quick too, I do think that it's important to keep more and more including people affected by cancer, siblings and children of parents who have cancer. I know that's something that I wasn't thinking about when I was going through it, but now that I'm an adult and I know how it affected my siblings and the rest of my family, I wish there were more programs that included them.
So true.
It is.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists today. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.